Welcome to Over the Target, Washington Examiner show about the investigations and scandals and salacious sagas that are currently taking place in Washington, D.C. and beyond. I'm Chris Irvin, Managing Editor of the Washington Examiner. I'm joined here by Sarah Bedford, the Investigations Editor. Hi.
Hello.
Flying just the two of us today and in the studio, so we're upgrading, which is nice. Why don't we just dive straight into it, though? And I think one of the main subjects of interest this week has been the raid on John Bolton's home, the former national security advisor to Trump. He's been a kind of thorn in Trump's side for a long time. But can you take us back to why we're here and why he's being investigated and why it's maybe there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye than just Trump going after an enemy?
Sure. So John Bolton, during the first Trump administration, was once Donald Trump's national security advisor, played a role in the national security team when the Trump administration took out a very powerful Iranian general, which is why for up until January he had a protective detail because of fears of Iranian retaliation against John Bolton. So he did play a very high-level role in Trump 1.0 until he became like the many former Trump administration officials who cashed out on criticizing their former boss when it looked like Trump was on his way out of power forever.
Seen as a very kind of deep state.
Deepest state.
Deepest of the deep, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he goes way back to even the Bush administration in some of, like, the sneaky stuff the Bush administration was doing. So he's been swampy forever.
Okay.
But towards the end of the first Trump administration, now we're in the summer of 2020, John Bolton goes to publish his book called The Room Where It Happened. And typically, if a former government official is going to write a book, there's a process in place for them to submit their manuscript and for it to be sort of reviewed for classified information or sensitive information or stuff like that. So John Bolton was in the middle of that process, and the Trump DOJ at the time sued him and said, this manuscript contains classified information, and you cannot proceed with publishing it. Well, John Bolton went ahead and did so anyway. And at the time, there was a grand jury investigation opened into whether he had violated classified information disclosure laws, as well as a lawsuit against him personally for publishing the book. You move into the summer of 2021. So now Joe Biden is president. It's the Biden DOJ.
Yeah.
The Biden DOJ drops the lawsuit, and Bolton's lawyers announce that the grand jury investigation has been closed.
Peace in our time.
Peace in our time for John Bolton. His troubles are over.
Okay.
Fast forward a few years, and we don't know how many. Sometime between that time in 2021, when the grand jury investigation is closed, and January 2025, when Donald Trump becomes president, the intelligence agencies under Biden are spying on an unnamed adversarial country's own spy services and find that this adversarial country has a bunch of emails on their servers from John Bolton that contain classified information.
Okay.
So now the Biden DOJ is investigating this. How hard are they really looking into it, given that Bolton's interests are aligned with theirs? That's unclear, and another, I think, part of the story that will come out. So we get now 7 months into the Trump administration is just continuing this investigation that began under Biden, sort of almost like a separate investigation from the one that involved the book, because the information that was in these emails never made it into the book.
Okay.
And so now you have these credible allegations that an adversarial country obtained classified information because of John Bolton's alleged sloppiness, and this becomes a huge mess.
So I think when this story first came out, everybody assumed that this was the Trump administration kind of reopening an older investigation. But what you're saying is that this actually has been going on quietly for months.
Potentially years.
Potentially years. So why are we only finding out about this now? What would the Biden administration have to kind of be quiet about it? He's not exactly a friend of theirs. I admit he's probably not a foe, but what's going on there?
Well, keep in mind a lot of different things were going on politically in context during this time at the Biden administration.
Yeah.
And one of the really important ones was that Joe Biden was under criminal investigation for mishandling classified information. So
how can we forget?
For the DOJ to publicly go after John Bolton for having had classified information allegedly in his house, to help with his memoir, when that's literally identical to the situation that Joe Biden was in, would have been a bad look for that DOJ. And we know that the Biden DOJ was incredibly politicized. The decisions that were being made at the FBI and the prosecutorial decisions at the Justice Department were very, very political. And so, you know, there's reasons to, I think, really question why, if the intelligence agencies had such serious evidence that John Bolton had not only jeopardized classified information, but had allowed it to end up in the hands of an American enemy, why this didn't move forward at the time.
I guess another thing I'm curious about, just not to keep harping on about the timeline, but I would imagine when Trump's folks found this, they were probably quite happy with it to an extent. You know, give one of Trump's foes a bit of a kicking. But why is it taking so long then for them to find out? Do you think it's literally just they found it in a skiff or something like that? I mean, do we even know the circumstances surrounding that?
So all of this is based on one New York Times report that came out this past week, based on people familiar with the matter, so we don't know, we don't have a sense of what agency this came from. It does have the hallmarks of the Trump administration doing a little bit of a CYA move because they were taking criticism for retribution against Bolton, right? So it does have the hallmarks of them being like, no guys, this was legit. But we do know that this came from John Ratcliffe, and that report says that John Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, was the one who brought it to the FBI director, Kash Patel. So this didn't originate with Patel or Bondi or these people who are accused of retaliation. It came from Ratcliffe because who discovered this? It wasn't criminal investigators. It was intelligence agencies who were spying on an adversarial country's servers. So that seems to be the timeline. We know that there were 2 different search warrants involved, so that can be a lengthy process, right? I mean, they started investigating Donald Trump for classified information basically the minute he left office.
For sure,
in 2021, and they did not raid Mar-a-Lago until August of 2022. So you're talking about a year and a half or more before that took place. So it does take some time for the process to work when you're doing especially a politically sensitive raid of some sort.
And has Bolton, what has he said about this? Has he pushed back on it?
He's been really quiet, but he is trying to hire Abby Lowell, who's quite booked and busy these days. He is defending all sorts of people who have either been fired from the Trump administration or who are potentially in legal jeopardy from this Trump DOJ. And, you know, he has represented people from both sides of the aisle. I don't think of him as a particularly ideological lawyer. He's just a really, really good criminal defense lawyer. If you commit crimes, hopefully you can afford Abby Lowell.
My only real knowledge of him was he was hired by Hunter Biden when the walls were closing in on Hunter, and he had a particularly sort of aggressive style of going after people. I'm assuming we will see some of that play out in the coming weeks.
Yes, he's sort of known for his aggressive style and you know, knowing how to navigate congressional investigations as well as criminal ones. He really, you know, he was Bob Menendez's lawyer. That one didn't work out so good. But he does have a pretty good track record.
Okay. Shifting tracks a little bit.
Wait, before we shift tracks, hold on, I'm sorry. I have one more little rant.
Okay,
I think the coverage of the Bolton stuff, up to and possibly including now, has been so breathtakingly dishonest for most of the legacy media. Because everything that the Trump DOJ has done has been sort of painted as retaliation, retribution, and Trump violating norms of DOJ independence. It's like everyone has gotten collective amnesia that the people who crossed that Rubicon first were the Biden people and the Democrats over the past 4 years. I mean, think just about the Fed chair, Lisa Cook, or not Fed chair, Fed governor member, Lisa Cook, who has been credibly accused of mortgage fraud. They tried to put Donald Trump in jail for a lesser paperwork allegation that was time barred by the statute of limitations, that they found a magic loophole around in front of a friendly judge to get him on. They tried to get him off of ballots by some like never before been tried violation of the 14th Amendment. They invented a new RICO standard in Georgia to try to put him in jail for filing legal challenges to elections, which is something that Democrats now do all the time. Mark Elias is like a millionaire for doing exactly that. And Jack Smith also found really novel interpretations of criminal statutes to charge Donald Trump with election interference in D.C. and under the Espionage Act for classified documents in Florida. That got thrown out by a judge, and the Supreme Court said, actually, you can't charge Trump with this felony that you charged him for giving a speech as president, and he's also immune because he was the president. So all of that to say that Donald Trump is not the one who violated norms, and if anything, if he doesn't go after that sort of behavior from Democrats, then like what does that say about the country if inventing charges against people can go unpunished?
Yeah.
You could make the argument that it's actually really healthy and necessary that Donald Trump have accountability for this sort of thing, and so it's like mutually assured destruction and it doesn't happen again.
Yes, it does seem to be a kind of, in the eye of the beholder that they'll
right.
Is Trump trying to kind of cleanse the system, whereas Democrats will argue that no, he's just escalating.
But do you hear any of them defending a single thing they did over the past? Is anyone like, no, Alvin Bragg's case was good? Nobody
been a bit
is
quiet
defending
on that
it.
front.
Yeah, I'm sorry for this rant. You may move on.
quite all right. I'd like to circle back slightly on Lisa Cook, who you mentioned. She is the Federal Reserve Board governor. We obviously know Trump's feud with Jerome Powell and interest rates, but Cook has kind of taken on somewhat outsized role in the last couple of weeks, and again, people will immediately jump to conclusions and say Trump is just doing this so he can get his own people on there. Why is there, first off, what are the allegations against her, and why shouldn't we just dismiss this?
The allegations against her, if proven true, are pretty serious for someone in charge of, setting interest rates that everybody else has to follow when they apply for a mortgage, which she is accused of applying for a mortgage on her primary residence for 2 different properties within a span of 2 weeks. So
right.
One in Michigan and one in Atlanta. She claims that both of these were her primary residence, and that's relevant for a few reasons, but the big one is that it gets you more favorable loan terms, right? I'm not a real grown-up who has a house, so I learned that from research, not from experience.
Okay.
And then she listed her Atlanta property almost immediately afterward for rent.
Okay.
So that suggests some sort of knowledge of the fact that she wasn't actually going to be using her Atlanta condo as her residence. And then, on top of all of that, she works in Washington, D.C. at the Federal Reserve. Yeah. So then we have a third, where is she commuting from Michigan? So these are pretty serious allegations against her.
Okay. And she's pushed back on this, obviously. Trump has tried to fire her. She's filed a lawsuit saying she's not going anywhere. How do we think this is going to play out?
I actually think this was kind of a dumb move from Donald Trump. Politically, this one I don't get. It's a waste of political capital. It definitely has all the looks, feels, smells of political interference with the Fed, which is the only thing that the Supreme Court has said you can't do. When he was trying to fire the heads of the CFPB, of the Merit Systems Protection Board, Trump has tried to fire numerous heads of so-called independent agencies saying, these people are exercising executive power and therefore they're subject to the wishes of the executive branch. And the Supreme Court said, absolutely, except the one example where that wouldn't apply would be the Federal Reserve. You can't do that. So it doesn't look like the law is necessarily on his side. He can fire them for cause, but what does cause look like? And even if he's technically allowed politically, do you think this is a smart move for him?
Well, I think he's been dancing around the Fed for a while, and it seems that he's reluctant to pull the trigger on Powell if he even could do that. It could be that I think Powell is popular with Wall Street, and maybe he has captains of Wall Street phoning him up saying, look, can you lay off him? So I don't know if it's that he's sees an opportunity with Cook to get rid of her, maybe install his own person that hypothetically might eventually be Powell's replacement. It does seem like a bit of a strange move. And if the mortgage fraud allegations are legitimate, one would think, though, that has to kind of play out for now before Trump pulls the trigger on something like that. And as you say, if he doesn't have the ability to do so, then he's just kind of wasting everybody's time and money, probably.
Right, and the other thing politically that makes this such a risky move is that now Donald Trump has even more ownership of what happens to the economy next, right? Yeah. He loses his number one scapegoat. If the Fed is now completely under his control, whether that's perceived or reality, then he's going to bear even more blame politically. So one would think he'd almost want to preserve that scapegoat.
Well, Trump has obviously always been very good at saying the system's rigged against him. And as you quite rightly point out, if he then has control over the Fed and the economy, and it doesn't go his way.
He's the one rigging it.
Then where does he go from there? There's only so long that he can say it's the Biden economy. I think it's probably, usually they say about 18-month period for that.
Yeah,
for that
I mean,
to happen.
Democrats try to do it in the first 6 weeks.
Oh, for sure.
So,
Everybody does it. Everybody does it all the time. But I'd like to move on to a subject that I wasn't too familiar with. It was very heartened to see your byline on it from a story back in 2017.
It dates me.
It does, yeah. But there was a lawsuit that caught my eye today that Judicial Watch had announced Freedom of Information Act lawsuits against the DOJ, the FBI, and the ODNI, and it's specifically on records on spying a character called Michael Caputo. I don't think he's a name that too many people would be familiar with right now, but perhaps you could take us a walk down memory lane on what this case against Caputo was and why we find ourselves here with Judicial Watch going after the administration. Sure.
So Michael Caputo was a communications advisor during Trump's 2016 campaign. We know now that the FBI at the time was sort of targeting anyone who had any past ties to Russia of any kind. Did they go to vacation to Moscow,
Sure.
10 years ago? They're on the sort of suspect list. And the initial subjects of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation were not people necessarily who had even power or influence in the Trump campaign. They were just people they could find Russian links to. And so Michael Caputo was someone who had done some consulting work in Russia, and around the time that all of this was happening, met with a person who he says at the time he didn't even know was Russian. This person's name was Henry Greenberg. That doesn't sound super Russian to me. And this person was saying he had dirt on Hillary Clinton. And so all of that to say that he was under scrutiny from the DOJ and from the House Intelligence Committee at the time of the Russia investigation. And, you referenced this interview that I did with him all those years ago. He had to liquidate his children's college funds to pay for the lawyers that he needed to try not to go to jail.
Sure.
Because at the time, that was a real possibility. I mean, they put Paul Manafort away. They put Rick Gates, his deputy, away.
Yeah.
They tried to put Michael Flynn away. And so this wasn't a situation where you could just wing, even if you knew you didn't do anything wrong, which Michael Caputo swore he didn't, and he has never been found to have done anything wrong at all. There was a really real risk that they were going to find something to put anyone away that they could, because that's what they did.
Okay.
And so this really ruined his life. I mean, he got cancer shortly after that, and he says that he blames the stress of being under such heavy scrutiny. So this Judicial Watch lawsuit that you mentioned has to do with some suspicions from Judicial Watch and others that actually in the run-up to the 2024 election, Michael Caputo, working with the Trump campaign again, was once again under surveillance by the Biden DOJ, and this watchdog group just wants to have more information about why they were spying on this guy again.
Well, I guess what I'm slightly unclear about is why they felt the need to kind of launch this lawsuit against what I assume would be a friendlier DOJ, FBI. Is this a process thing, or am I missing a bigger picture here?
Well, Judicial Watch is not the only group that has complained about this, right? We've written about other watchdog groups like the Oversight Project, which have been frustrated with the pace of the Justice Department in particular releasing documents that they say they're going to release. And so in some ways this is a sort of procedural thing. It's not typical that you can get any documents through FOIA unless you have the resources to litigate, which is, I used to be like a FOIA firing off when I was younger, and now it's like, well, if I'm not going to bother to follow up with a lawsuit, it's actually kind of a waste of time.
They deliberately grind the gears as much as, throw sand in the gears, I should say,
exactly.
as much as they can.
Yeah, if you could just wait 13 years for that breaking news story, then you'll get your FOIA response. And so, in some ways that could be part of that procedure, but it is, ODNI is headed by Tulsi Gabbard. You'd think she'd have an interest in releasing some of this stuff. That being said, they seem to have some sort of plan for releasing this stuff to sort of create a narrative. Each disclosure is sort of built on the next one, that perhaps they're getting there, they're just not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, Gabbard's obviously been quite systematic in what she's released, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is something that she was planning on doing, or maybe it's just Judicial Watch saying, by the way, remember this guy as well, because like I said at the beginning there, he's kind of a forgotten figure in all this, and quite tragic that his life was completely ruined by it, and his health suffered as a result. I guess that's something to watch over the coming, well, I don't know, with FOIA months, I don't know.
See you in a few years,
3 years.
another half decade.
Moving on just to the subject that, you know, it pops up all the time, although I do think there has been a little bit of, the narrative has died down a bit. I am curious on the Jeffrey Epstein case, why the House Oversight Committee seems to want to keep kind of breathing life into a story that Donald Trump would rather go away. And they have asked to see this Epstein birthday book, this so-called book that the Wall Street Journal did a report on, which claimed there was a body drawing and a sort of fake conversation between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Why are they going after it? Is it? I'm baffled by the decision.
I'm just as baffled as you.
Yeah.
Because James Comer seems like a dyed-in-the-wool partisan soldier, right? Someone who toes the party line for the most part. And so to do something that's sort of actively harming the Trump administration, right when it seems that the Trump administration has skillfully landed the plane on Epstein.
Yeah, it was looking a bit wobbly there for a while.
It really was, but I think they touched runway.
Yeah.
The outcry has died down. They made a show of going around to all the grand juries trying to get the stuff unsealed. They talked to Ghislaine Maxwell. They really did everything that critics said, well, you haven't done this and you haven't done that. They went and did it all.
Yeah.
And so there's really not much left to criticize with the way the Trump administration has been handling it to keep like resuscitating this back to life. Doesn't make sense politically.
Is that because there is that part of the Trump base or the MAGA base that will never fully be satisfied?
I don't think it's just Trump and MAGA. I think Epstein just like brings people together. You're a weirdo if you don't have a conspiracy theory about Jeffrey Epstein at this point.
Yeah.
If you're like, no, he definitely was just like a weird pervert who killed himself in jail, and that's what I believe. Like that makes you the outlier in America.
That makes you the conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that it's one of the only bipartisan things moving in Congress.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of why Comer is doing this is to prove Trump right, that he's not in the book, and to sort of vindicate his claims. We know that Donald Trump has filed this massive lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and really swears up and down that he wasn't in this book. And Melania Trump, she's also threatening Hunter Biden with a lawsuit because he claims Epstein introduced Donald and Melania, which there's no evidence of that.
Yeah.
Except for that Epstein was running around telling people that in 2019 before he died, but it seems like he was just trying to stay out of jail.
Yeah.
So, you know, it seems that the Trumps are really serious about completely vindicating the claims that they didn't really have anything to do with Epstein past decades ago. So maybe that's what Comer's doing.
I do believe no one's actually seen the book either, right? Whenever the Journal has reported on it, we've not seen a physical copy of things. So perhaps that's...
And they never claimed to have it either.
Right.
I believe the language they used was reviewed by the journals, which makes me think they were sort of shown it, and then they didn't get to didn't get to take it home with them, you know?
Yeah. The last topic I just want to bring up, it's not necessarily in this total wheelhouse, but it's a really fascinating ongoing case, and it's the Virginia governor's race, which is coming up thick and fast. It's in November. Republican nominee is Winsome Earle-Sears. She's the current lieutenant governor. She's running against Democrat Abigail Spanberger. Spanberger has pulled ahead by about 5 points for quite a while now, and Sears' campaign has been criticized at times for what's been going on. But history seems to be repeating itself a little bit here, where if you recall 4 years ago, Glenn Youngkin was running as a little bit of an underdog, and then the issue of what's happening in Virginia schools exploded. And in the context 4 years ago, it was more so parents, I think, who were stuck at home during COVID were listening to audio lessons and going, hang on, what are my kids being taught? And Youngkin was able to harness that issue, harness that anger, and ride to victory. And there seems to be, in the schools again, there seems to be Sears harnessing momentum there. It's in a different form though, and it specifically goes back to the transgender issue from what I can tell. What is your kind of understanding of it, and where are we with investigations there? And do you think that this could be something that the Republicans can really kind of make hay with in the closing stages of the race.
Absolutely. It seems like Spanberger wants to lose the race. I mean, she had just a couple of months ago a double-digit lead, something like 16, 17 points over Earl Sears, and that's down to, like you said, 5 or 6 when we're in the part of the race that counts. Instead of responding to all of the transgender controversies that came out, she decided to come out instead and say that she was going to make Virginia a sanctuary state once again when she becomes governor, which is another one of Democrats' really unpopular positions with normal people. It brings the normals together to say we don't actually like to have transgender stuff being taught in our schools and, you know, close the borders and enforce immigration laws. That's not really limited just to the hard right.
Yeah.
So those are just some odd positions for Spanberger to take. In terms of the transgender controversies, in Arlington County, we had a registered sex offender who claimed that he was transgender, being given access to a high school locker room that services a public pool area there where children much younger than high school age, girls, were changing in this locker room.
Yep.
Parents repeatedly complained to the school board, to the school administrators, to the county, anyone who would listen, and they all said, we're going to protect the rights of this transgender individual.
Sure.
When finally, after he exposed himself to a very young girl under the age of 10, and it was reported to the police, they actually bothered to pull up his records and see that this is a person who has actually been convicted of a string of heinous crimes, including having child pornography, and is the highest level registered sex offender that's possible. And so the outrage in that county has been, why did it take so long when so many moms were complaining that their girls were changing in the room with this man who was clearly not there to change? I mean, he was just hanging out in this locker room.
Yeah.
They didn't stop it and repeatedly defended the rights of the transgender individual in this occasion.
Yeah.
And then you move over to Loudoun County, which is ground zero for everything that happened in the 2021 race.
For sure.
And in Loudoun County, you have a couple of months ago in May, we covered this quite extensively at the Washington Examiner. You had a situation where, in defiance of the Trump administration's orders, this school district was still allowing transgender individuals to change in the bathrooms that correspond with their identity and not their biological sex. So you have a biological girl who's changing in the bathroom of the locker room at Stonebridge High School, which just happy coincidence was the site of another national news transgender incident back in 2021. And she overhears some boys who are privately talking amongst themselves, not to her, that they're uncomfortable with a girl being in there. Not in offensive terms. They say things like, why is there a girl in here, dude?
Yeah.
They're teenage boys.
Yeah.
She takes out her phone and records them changing, and the school opens Title IX investigations into the boys and then suspends them from school and puts a permanent mark on their record as having sexually harassed this girl, even though she broke the much more clear-cut rules of not filming people in their locker rooms. And so this school board has been just lit up with, why are you punishing these boys for, being normal boys?
Yeah.
And the other controversy in Loudoun County right now is that some pictures have been circulating and going viral that the male staff bathroom has a big sign out front that says male staff only. And so the question parents have is, why do you adults get to have sex-specific bathrooms, but you are making our children share bathrooms with people of different genders, when we had documented sexual assaults happen at Loudoun County with transgender identifying people over the past few years? So all of that to say that all of this is coming into the news, and Spanberger has had no answer for it.
It really does seem that the Democrats in general, but obviously specifically in Virginia, they're backed into a corner because they have used this as a positive talking point for years and years, and then when the switch is flipped and the backlash happens, they don't know how to defend themselves, and it just feels like they constantly trip up over themselves in it. And I really am fascinated that this seems to be playing out again 4 years later, and it's almost like they just haven't learned their lesson. And I don't know if Winsome Earl Sears has enough time to catch up, but if this anger continues to grow, and Virginia, obviously quite a purple state and can go either way. I for sure think that this could only be a good thing for Republicans. They just need to ride that momentum until November. But I guess there's plenty of time left to see if something else happens.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing Spanberger does have going for her is all of the fired federal employees from Trump in Northern Virginia, which is the most populous area of the state. But you're totally right. I mean, this is, if Winsome Earl Sears was going to have any chance of winning, this is kind of it on a silver platter, right?
You don't want to mess with people's kids, basically. That's what riles parents up more than anything. Okay, I think we covered quite a lot there.
We did.
Yeah, lots of different topics. Why don't we leave it there?
That sounds great.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have Kalen back next time.
Yeah.
He's on vacation right now, so I hope he's enjoying it. But until next time, thanks very much.
Thank you.